Anne's got a cat.
He's like, let me be in the show today. Hi, everybody. I love sitting on laps and being in shows. Yay!
Absolutely. Now, I don't want to say that there's some nepotism going on, but most people don't get on the show and then he just shows up.
I know. That's how cats are. They're just like, yeah, you're welcome.
You're welcome. You get to see my beautiful face. Bovine, you look so pretty today. Did you do something
It's
different
like,
with your huh? Did
he's
you do
like,
something
I've got
different with your
my,
hair, Bovine? Yeah.
he's got his annoyed ears on, so I'm gonna put him down.
Yeah, because he's gonna start hacking away. You'd be like, "Meow." Hey, we got Lori. Lori Worrell is with us this fine morning. Hi,
Hello,
Lori.
Lori.
Hey, Lori, did you ever get your trampoline back? We had a pretty good thunderstorm here the other day. It blew through Shoreview, and it took away Lori's trampoline. Goodbye. Oh.
Oh, it's
So,
like trampolines are kind of like a half inflated parachute already. So
yeah, they're pretty much wind catchers. It's like having your own sail,
Mhm. Yeah.
that you can bounce around on. So hopefully, Lori, you got your trampoline back, and all is right with the universe. So
Oh,
so yeah. So you went to? Did you go to brunch today, Ann? Did you go to Beezy's?
yeah, we went to Beezy's with two friends of ours, Pat and Elliot. So we had
Nice.
lunch or breakfast. It was fabulous. I wish I was hungry again because I want to go back and have their
What,
cinnamon rolls weren't ready yet. So just as we were leaving, the cinnamon rolls were ready. I'm like, no, wait, let me wait. I'm gonna be more hungry and then I can eat a cinnamon roll. But I didn't eat one. I had a cookie
see,
instead.
and we had similar breakfast experiences because when Joe went to McDonald's at 6:30 this morning to get our delicious brunch, the apple pies were not ready.
Okay,
So
that doesn't make sense. Apple
I know.
pie, I mean, should they always have the apple pies? I mean,
I
it's not
think
like they're making the pies. They've got them already in a big box in the freezer. Just put them in the deep fryer and get me a pie.
Yeah, I know. But I just thought that was funny because I was comparing my McDonald's pie experience with your amazing homemade cinnamon roll experience at Beezy's. So,
Yeah,
because, yeah,
they're
yeah.
apples and apples.
That's right, Ann. Good comparison. Super smart.
Thanks.
Uh, yeah, so I've had a leisurely morning this morning. I've actually spent a lot of time putting my stuff together today because you suggested the other day that we take a closer look at the storm that wrecked Iowa on Monday, the derecho that went through. And it's amazing. The deeper I dig on that, the more devastating you're seeing this. Cedar Rapids is literally closed right now. Cedar Rapids is closed because they took the brunt of that storm as far as nationwide, because that storm was gigantic. It was what Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, parts of Wisconsin, and Iowa is the one that really took it into teeth, and specifically Cedar Rapids. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So you suggested that we do that, and it's really interesting. We'll talk about both the weather impact of that, but just the socioeconomic impact of that storm as well, because it was a huge bummer. So it's a fairly lengthy presentation, so I'm going to dig in. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So we're going to bring that up. So for those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about right now, specifically what we're talking about, a weather event that happened on Monday the 10th. It's this particular line of storms started in South Dakota and really started to get going in about 8 o'clock in the morning through Omaha, and just continued to gain in intensity and just general nastiness as it went throughout the entire day. So, like I said, this derecho affected parts of Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana. And like I said, it was at its peak destructiveness as it was going through essentially central and eastern Iowa. So let's take a closer look at that. For those of you that are curious, a derecho, and it's so funny because everybody gets all excited because they're like, it's a made-up term that the Weather Channel made, and technically it's not. The word was first coined by a German scientist back in 1888, and then it sort of fell out of fashion, and then sort of kind of back in 2012, there was a really nasty derecho that went through the Midwest, and then it sort of became a popular term again. So NOAA officially defines a derecho as a widespread, long-lived windstorm. It's associated with a band of rapidly moving showers and thunderstorms. And by rapidly moving, I'll quantify that in just a second. So for a derecho to be considered a derecho, it's got to travel on the ground as an entire storm system for 240 miles and move at speeds of greater than 58 miles an hour. And so the derecho itself is a Spanish word that means essentially straight ahead. And that's significant when you're talking about a derecho, especially when you're talking about winds that are associated with a derecho. So the August 10th derecho, the one that came through on Monday, was particularly devastating. For instance, it traveled over 740 miles in the span of 14 hours. So that baby was hauling rapidly. It had maximum recorded wind speeds of 112 miles an hour on the ground. So that's, if you're talking tornado speeds, that would be like F1 tornado speeds, and much higher than your first level or your class 1 of hurricane. So, and again, those are sustained over several minutes. So that is in itself, yeah, this was absolutely a derecho by definition, and a particularly nasty one. So if you're looking at this map that I'm showing you right now, this is the derecho as it was moving through the Chicago area on Monday. So like I said, it went through Iowa, then it caused extensive amounts of damage in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and the Chicago area took a pretty good hit from that as well. So if you look at Monday's event, and in a minute we'll get into what a derecho is, how they form, how they're different than regular thunderstorms, how they're different than tornadoes. Well, I'm going to address this comment. Karen Fink, you're welcome, Karen. I saw your post yesterday, kind of talking about the absence of coverage of this. So I'm super happy to talk about this. I think it's important that we talk about the event itself on Monday, educate them on what this is, and maybe talk a little bit about things that you can do to help Cedar Rapids, because like I said, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, really, I was reading about some of the devastation that's taken place there, and it's not just, it's devastating for the people there. It's devastating for the ecology and the economy. So it's super worrisome. So as far as this event, the event affected several states, but like I said, the peak of the event was Iowa and northern Illinois. As of this morning, there are still 100,000 Iowans without power, most of them in the Cedar Rapids area. And it's because Cedar Rapids, they lost almost their entire electrical infrastructure due to the storm. So many trees were downed that it took out pretty much the majority of their power system because, and we'll talk about that in a second. Again, Cedar Rapids is the hardest hit. The city's electrical infrastructure has been destroyed. The one that got me is that almost half of the canopy, the tree canopy in Cedar Rapids, has been leveled. So they lost half their trees in one storm, and that's part of the reason that they've had such a difficult time with their electrical infrastructure, is that so many down power lines that there's simply not enough manpower to fix it. As far as overall, this is going to be a devastating agricultural loss for the state of Iowa. 14 million acres of farmland were affected. 43% of the crops, corn and soybeans in Iowa, have been affected by this storm. They don't think that all 43% will be a loss, but in just surveying farmers, many of those corn stalks, and this is the part that's particularly crappy, is that they're not that far from harvest. So you've got corn stalks that are 8 feet tall, and when you've got derecho winds that are coming through at 60 to 100 miles an hour, those big corn stalks are going to catch all that wind and get bent over. If the stalks didn't break, they might have a chance at salvaging that corn, but many of those stalks are broken. And once a corn stalk is broken, that corn stalk is going to die, and that is a loss. The other thing that was super devastating is that many farmers were holding on to corn from last year in hopes that the prices would rise. So that they had a lot of corn in stock, and a lot of those silos holding that corn were also damaged. So anything that they were hoping to recoup from that corn with better corn prices this year, plus those that corn that was already being grown, is lost. And so they're literally talking, this could be $1 billion loss for farmers in Iowa this year alone. Again, the National Guard was deployed as of the 13th, which was 3 days after the fact. The government response on this, both at the state and federal level, has been abysmal. Pence was in Iowa the other day talking to farmers, saying, "Hey, we're going to help you," but they have yet to declare any sort of national disaster in the state of Iowa. Either the state finally considered it a state disaster, and the governor and the National Guard came in on Friday, but they waited days in order for this to happen. So, like I said, overall, and then what Karen was talking about, she posted an article the other day about just how the national coverage of this has been terrible. This is literally hurricane type damage. If this was a hurricane, everybody would be talking about it. It would be all they would be talking about on the Weather Channel. But the fact that this was a different event in the central part of the United States during COVID, and during the fact that we found out who Joe Biden was going to have his VP, this story has gotten completely buried, and that sucks. So this was a genuine disaster for a lot of people that are really going to be feeling the effects of this for years to come. As far as what a derecho is, derecho versus thunderstorm, we're going to do a little thunderstorm 101 right now. So if we're going to make a thunderstorm, you have to have a big ass cloud. And these big ass clouds are known as cumulonimbus clouds. And if you're going to form a cumulonimbus cloud, and that's what I've got a picture of a cumulonimbus cloud right there, you have to have rapidly rising air. And if you want rapidly rising air, that air needs to be warm and wet. And that's what makes what we call unstable air. Questions so far, Ann Brothers?
No, this is just really interesting.
Okay.
Keep continue, please.
Okay. So the United States of America is the thunderstorm capital of the world. High five! And it's not that no place on earth, it's not like we're the only place that has thunderstorms. We happen to be the place that has the most thunderstorms and the most severe thunderstorms. And that's just a matter of geography. We have this nice large air mass just north of us called Canada. You have nice Arctic air that flows down. It dries out as it goes through this landmass of Canada. On the other hand, we have this big southern, series of water. The South, the Atlantic, as you get out of the Gulf of Mexico, and the Gulf of Mexico itself, which is very warm air, very moist air. And because of where we are within our pressure zones and prevailing wind systems, that air moves up and across the United States, and they often meet together right here in the central United States. And that is a problem when it comes to severe weather. Okay, so it's just a matter of geography. So if we look at the surface map from earlier in the week, what we had a low pressure system that was peaking up into Canada. We had cold front. We had a warm front leading edge. And so when you have a cold front, a low pressure system like this with two distinct fronts, warm front, cold front, in between those fronts, you have an area where the air is very warm and moist, and it's moving in a counterclockwise direction. And it just so happened that the air that was moving into this section of the United States on Monday was particularly warm and moist. Dew points in the morning in that neck of the woods were in the 70s, which is ridiculous. Relative humidity is up towards 100%. So in that situation, it was really the ingredients for something very bad that was going to happen, and that's exactly what did happen. So the thing about warm, moist air is that warm, moist air is less dense than the air around it, so it rises all by itself. When you have a cold front, because cold fronts move faster than warm fronts, so what happens is that you have these cold fronts, they start steaming down from Canada. They're moving very fast. Remember, this warm air wants to rise all by itself anyway. And then when you wedge all of this cold air underneath it, it pushes it up even faster. And this is why I highlighted this, because you want to remember, the warmer and wetter the air, the more unstable it is, and the faster it wants to rise. And the faster it wants to rise, the worse that's going to be. So in this picture right here, this is kind of a profile of a cold front and a warm front. This air gets pushed up, and then we're going to start making our big ass clouds. And we're going to start to make our big ass clouds much faster, and that makes them more dangerous. Okay, so if we're looking at this surface map, so again, here's our warm front, here's our cold front. I've got that area circled in yellow, and then where we can expect to see storms popping up is along this pink line right here. That's where we would expect to see our storms. That's why a lot of times when it's really hot and sticky and then you have a bunch of thunderstorms and then the next day it's really pleasant, it's because that line that separates the cold air and the warm air is passed. Now you're getting this nice, stable, cool air down from Canada, and everybody's like, oh, I feel so much better. The price is that you get these big thunderstorm events. Not all of those thunderstorm events are created equal, though. All right, so let's take a quick look at a big-ass cumulonimbus cloud, because these are a very dynamic, super complicated system. Your supercell clouds, or your cumulonimbus clouds, are the most interesting cloud by far. They have huge vertical development, meaning that they start off the ground at maybe 10,000 feet, and they can get up as high as 30 to 32,000 feet. These things can top out up in the stratosphere. So in the meantime, there's lots of room for lots of stuff to go on. Now, in most cumulonimbus clouds, the way they set up is you have an area where that air starts to move up. That's kind of the birth of your cumulonimbus cloud. As it gets up in the cloud, it cools down. It gets more dense again as it gets cool, and then it starts to drop down, and we form what's called a downdraft, and you can see that right there, okay? In a derecho event, the downdraft is the thing that we look most closely at. And in any cumulonimbus cloud, and anytime you're having a thunderstorm, if you stand out in front of an approaching thunderstorm, you'll always notice that you have this big gust of wind and it's really cold and you're like, things are happening. And that's because you're sitting in what's called the gust front area. And what that means is that you're standing in the area where the downdraft is coming down the cloud at rapid speeds. It hits the ground and then it spreads out, and you feel that as a gust front. And that's your first indication that you got a change in weather, that your storm is coming. Of course, it's going to be lightning and thundering. And then you get this big, stretch of rain, and then the storm will pass, and then you'll have less rain. And if you're going to have a tornado, it's going to take place in the back half of the storm. It's that quiet sort of, hey, the storm's over. That's when you should be scared, okay, of a tornado. But derecho is a little bit different. So mainly what you want to remember about a cumulonimbus cloud is that you have an updraft. The stronger the updraft, more likely the stronger the downdraft, because you have this air moving up rapidly. It's kind of capping out here at the top of the storm. It gets pushed around, and then it gets pulled down by gravity, pulled down by density. And these downdrafts can be very dangerous. That's why planes do not fly through cumulonimbus clouds. There was I want to say 25, 30 years ago, there was a flight in Dallas that was trying to land. They flew underneath the cumulonimbus cloud. They got caught in a downdraft and pushed down to the ground, and that airplane crashed. And so, pilots are very careful to avoid these areas, because this is it's a big gust of wind pushing down from this cloud. It's a big gust of wind without it being a mesocyclone like this, and we'll talk about that here. So one of the things to remember when it comes to derecho is that there are essentially four kinds of cumulonimbus thunderstorms. The first one is what we call a single cell. It's a smaller cumulonimbus cloud. They tend to be weak and isolated. We had one of those last night here in Dresser. This weird little storm popped up about midnight. Lots of thunder and lightning, a little bit of rain, very little wind. It was really just a classic single cell thunderstorm. The other kind is what we call a multi-cell storm, and these tend to pop up where you've got some sort of cold front or occlusion taking place, and so you might have two cells that pop up next to each other. The squall line is what we're really going to pay attention to today, because your squall line thunderstorm is what essentially is we'll call it the backbone, if you will, of a derecho. Because, like I said, derechos are really a chain of several thunderstorms. It's like I said, it's an event, and a squall line is an event. And we see a decent amount of squall lines in the Midwest and Michigan and so forth. And then finally, we have the supercell, otherwise known as a mesocyclone. These are usually isolated, very powerful storms. They are capable of producing large hail, tornadoes, and in some instances, you actually get a supercell that's made up of these large mesocyclones, which is not awesome. So, as far as that's right, Ann. Twister. Good. See, putting it all together. All right. So, like I said, derechos are associated with these squall line thunderstorms, and these squall line thunderstorms are interesting because they both feed each other and they eat each other, and that's a unique thing. So derechos are associated with squall line thunderstorms, but there have to be certain conditions in order to hit the derecho level. So the conditions have to be just right, and that's why they don't happen every day. You have to start out with the right kind of air. That air has to be particularly warm and moist. You have to have the right kind of moisture conditions. It's not just a temperature thing, it's a moisture thing. How much more moist is the air in front of that front versus behind the front? And finally, I'm going to come back to this picture in a minute because this picture is kind of a big deal. In a derecho event, you have to, your updrafts have to be really strong. The air has to be really unstable. We saw those conditions on Monday. And here's the thing about Monday's derecho. It really surprised meteorologists. They were not predicting this event. Sunday night, they were not predicting this event. Monday morning, they're like, things happened, and this is going to be bad today. But they had this huge change in terms of wind direction, in terms of instability, and then things just kind of went crazy on Monday morning. So the thing is about this particular event is that your downdrafts have to be particularly strong. So if your updraft is really strong, your downdrafts are going to be really strong. And these downdrafts are going to do two things. First, they're going to strike the ground hard, and then they're going to spread out along the front itself, and it essentially causes what's called a microburst. At the same time, they're going to suck air in from the sides because this air is moving down so fast. And the way air works, as air empties out in one place, it's going to fill in from someplace else. So this air drops down very quickly, and then it sucks air in from the sides, making that downdraft even stronger. And so the result is this bow. It's called a bow echo shape to the storm, and it produces these very strong straight line winds. And as it bows out, again, it feeds itself and it feeds other storms around it. So if what you're looking at in this picture right here, you're essentially looking at a storm straight on that's coming right at you. And though we have you can see the downdraft right here, you can see it hitting the ground and bowing outwards. So at the same time, what's happening is these arrows are feeding storms that are going to be next to it. And again, you can see here the dry air is being sucked into the storm and pushed down again. And as a result of that, you end up getting these very distinctive bow echoes on your radar. So this is actually the radar from the derecho on Monday. So here we are, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and you can see this thing cruising along across. Here's Iowa right here. And you can just see these bows getting more and more defined. And what's interesting is that there was so much energy in the atmosphere, it just kept feeding and feeding and feeding this line of storms. One of the things that's unique about this derecho event is that there is enough energy to keep feeding this line of storms so that instead of petering out, it gets much stronger, and then it finally peters out. But that's what you're seeing here. And you can see this specifically defined right along here in eastern Iowa. And you can see this line of storms. Look how, what I found interesting is the width of this line of storm. It is really nasty. And then, of course, as the energy starts to diminish those lines of storms, you can see the change in color as far as precipitation. But this is a really fantastic picture of that radar as it's going through the event all day on Monday. As far as derecho versus tornado, and I was putting this together, I kept thinking derecho versus tornado sounds like a really bad sci-fi movie channel, but it's not. And there are some differences because I can remember when we were kids, Ann, and the tornado that went through Sturgis. It's likely that was not a tornado. It's actually likely that was a derecho event and some sort of straight line wind event. So in terms of storms, I'm going to go back to my picture of my cumulonimbus cloud here. If this is the front of the storm right here, if you're standing right out here and this is the front of the storm and the storm is moving in this direction, tornadoes form at the back end of a storm, and derecho events, or the wind damage from a derecho, happens at the front end of the storm. So that's one of the big differences in terms of wind. I'm going to jump ahead again. I should have put a picture right here. Derechos are the result of downdraft wind at the front end of a cumulus cloud. Tornadoes are the result of the updraft winds at the back end. They both cause significant damage, but that damage looks very different. Now, here's the rub about derechos is that those cumulonimbus clouds are so intense and so well formed that you can have those frontline winds on the front end, and you can still also get tornadoes on the back end. So, these storms are just nasty. As far as the damage, like I said, the damage looks really different. Tornado damage is often localized along a narrow path with no distinct directional pattern. Everything is just torn up everywhere. Where derecho damage tends to be much wider. So like, for instance, one of the guys they were interviewing from Iowa Public Radio was talking about how, the swath of damage along his farmland was 40 miles. So like where you might, I think the widest tornado track ever was about 2 miles wide. Derecho damage tracks tend to be 5 miles, 10 miles, 40 miles, 60 miles. So they're a much wider damage path. And their damage tends to be directional, meaning that you can look at the damage and you can see where the wind was coming from. And I'll show some pictures of that in a second. And I said with any derecho storm, and this is where it's tricky, there can be smaller, more intense bands of wind that cause smaller, more intense areas of wind. And we actually saw that here in a thunderstorm a couple of nights ago. We had a thunderstorm and we had a real intense burst of wind that came through Dresser. And it was interesting. I went on a walk the next morning, and like this part of Dresser that we live, which is, I guess, technically South Dresser, was fine. And as I moved towards the north end of town, there was a ton of tree damage. And so that was a really good example of a microburst within our little path, that you had one really small swath of area, maybe even just, 100 feet wide, that was much windier than even the areas next to it. And you see that in derechos all the time. You'll see a swath of damage that's maybe 100 yards long, and then damage but less damage here, and then another 100 yards, more damage. And so the hard part about when you're dealing with derecho stuff is the idea that you have these dynamic physical systems that are moving rapidly. It's all fluid dynamics, and it's complex within it. And the fact that we know as much as we know now about how these storms work is good, but predicting them is still very difficult. It's one of those things where they look at direction, they look at speeds, they look at lifted indices, they look at the wind speeds of the updraft and the downdraft, and they look where the energy is going within these storms to try to do better in terms of predicting them. So as far as the damage, this is some of the damage from Monday's storm. This is corn damage that you can see. And again, like I talked before, in terms of directional damage, you can see where the wind was coming from. You can see it was coming hard from this direction, knocking down that corn. They were showing some footage from one of the local radio or news stations in Iowa, and you can see it. You see trees being toppled over. Here's another one. This is a really telling picture. What you're seeing here is this green that you see in this picture is corn and soybeans. And what you're looking at in these two circles is you're looking at where all of the corn has been knocked over. So I want you to note that this is all along. This is Des Moines over here. This is the other half of Des Moines. This is when you're starting to get in. Ames is up here. Cedar Rapids is over. And you can see this miles upon miles of corn damage right here. It's devastating. That's corn that is not getting harvested. That's corn that's going to get chopped up and fed to cattle. But that's corn that people aren't going to make money on, which is heartbreaking. These are tree damage from Cedar Rapids. And again, that directional thing, that these trees, like in a tornado, these trees may not even be uprooted, but they would be pretty much just stripped of everything. That damage is very haphazard. That's not the case here. The damage is very organized. You can see where it was coming from. It just took out these massive trees. These are a couple of silos. Again, this is from this latest storm. And again, you can see that directional damage. You can see where the wind was coming from is these corn silos. Again, all full of corn, all being stored, pushed over. Again, that's corn that's now, it can't be sold. And I think that's it. That's what I have. So, if you're interested, I know the Red Cross is looking for donations for Cedar Rapids. You can go there. I know that I want to say Iowa Public Radio has information as well, as far as where you can, if you're interested in donating to the cause. But like I said, this is a really devastating time. And again, folks, one of the things to think about is that they're trying to manage this crisis during a pandemic. So consider what that's like. You're trying to help people. The hospitals are full right now. They had Cedar Rapids had an influx of over 300 people that were injured. I want to say there were 7 deaths in Iowa as a result of the storm. Everything from trees on houses. There was one of the I can't think of the name of the company that takes care of the power. He's electrocuted working on a line. So, this is a really I would say disaster situation in terms of they're trying to manage this, plus they're trying to manage COVID, and so they just, like I said, they need help. People need help. People are living in tents, and the fact that this story really has been buried by the national news is not awesome. So, like I said, we're just trying to bring attention to that today, kind of teach you up on kind of how this happens. And it's one of those nature events that's unique, pretty unique to the United States. And again, derechos aren't unique to the United States in terms of they do happen. I know there was one that happened in Europe just a few years back. But these sorts of events do happen more often here. So, yeah. And what kind of questions do you have for me?
Well, I just thought it was interesting because, tornadoes, there's this visual thing that you see, so it's very dramatic. And with a derecho, it seems like you don't see it until it's done. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it hasn't gotten the same sort of media, because it seems like that sort of event happens more often than we understand. It's just, Duncan and I, early this spring, there was a pretty bad thunderstorm, and it took down trees in a part where we walk. I had pictures of me pretending to cut down the tree. But when we were looking at the damage, that you could see that it had come from straight line winds. It was not a tornado, but it was straight line winds. So I wonder how much more often this is this happens and we don't pay attention to it because there isn't this dramatic funnel cloud coming out of the sky that there's no TV shows about this, nobody's chasing these things.
Chasing straight line winds.
I think that might be another part of the problem, is that it hasn't gotten the media coverage because we're like, well, we don't know what this thing is. And if it's not a tornado, it couldn't be that bad. If it's not a hurricane. And, with climate change, we might be seeing more dramatic things like this, where we have to step back after it's over and say, oh, this is what happened, instead of saying, oh, this is what's happening right now. There's no, it seems like this is more common than tornadoes, but we don't have a warning system for this. And I think we're going to see more of this.
Yes. And I think in terms of straight line winds, you will see this whenever you have a severe thunderstorm. This is essentially what starts the party, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Almost every severe thunderstorm has some sort of downdraft event, and you may or may not have a tornado with that. It's just that it's unique to see them lined up like that, where you literally have hundreds of miles of length of this, and then it moves over this, because like I said, storms will often use up their energy before they can go on a run like that. So the fact that this thing made a run 700 miles is crazy. And I would totally agree with you. It's not, it is much more, it's much more difficult to kind of wrap your mind around this. Because like you said, there's not a visual attachment. It's one of those things where you experience it and you're like, oh, this is bad. But again, it's not that piece where you're going to take what you're taking pictures of. And if you go to some of the websites, sorry, I'm laughing because you've got Susie Nelson is with us. She's like the brother sisters, straight line chasers.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is there going to be a TV show for that? And so that's the thing. It's not this one. It's not a hurricane, which is long, so that you get, you can send the planes in and everybody knows, you can see this big picture. We can watch it. It's this big visual, or this tornado, this funnel coming out of the sky and ripping everything up, like, oh, let's go chase that. I mean, it's one, like you said, it's thermodynamics. So it's energy. We're just, and you don't watch energy, you watch the aftermath of energy. You see the aftermath of it. So I think that's probably, obviously they're, it's devastating, but it seems more likely to happen than a tornado. Like, you're more likely to get downdrafts and microbursts than you are a tornado. So
correct.
We need to start, this should be something we should be paying attention to.
Agreed. And I think, you're seeing more as we're seeing events like this and people are kind of documenting them more. This is a thing that I think social media has really kind of brought derechos to the forefront
Mm-hmm.
because, back in the old days when it was just, your local news, you really didn't report about events unless there was a ton of damage, and that was mostly tornadoes. And like I said, our understanding of how straight line winds and micro bursts and downdrafts has really changed significantly in the past 30 years because we've gotten so much better at using technology. The use of Doppler radar when it came to imaging storms was groundbreaking in our understanding of what's happening within a cumulonimbus cloud. For years we didn't know that. We did not understand how dynamic these clouds are and what's happening, what's driving, the energy within this. And it's all about the energy and what's happening within the storms. So for sure. Susie's killing us today. Today on Straight Line Chasers, more lines.
Yeah, more lines. So anyway, I heard about this. I didn't hear about it happening until what I think Wednesday or Thursday. Because I just didn't hear about it on the media, and I didn't know very much about it, but I knew that you being the weather nerd, the super weather nerd that you are, I'm like, oh, you know who needs to talk about this is Jenny, because Jenny will help me understand it, and hopefully help other people understand it too, and how, how devastating this is, and how, it's not having an impact on us right now, but that's a lot of people that are out of work, that are don't have power, and that will affect your grocery bill in the next couple of months, so
it is. It's absolutely going to affect your food prices. And if you're paying attention to what's going on with the pandemic, your food prices have been going up anyway. And this is something that will affect that as well. And that doesn't mean run out and buy all food right now, but it just means that, these are the things that, if you want to know what drives, corn prices, what drives beef prices, it's events like this that take place. Many of these farmers are insured for this and that. Like, for instance, those farmers might be insured for their crops in the ground, but they are federally insured, but they may not be insured for that corn that was in those silos waiting to be sold. So unless they had private insurance covering that corn, that's going to be a complete loss for them.
And I don't think many people realize how much food that we have, especially processed food that contains corn or soybeans. Most processed food, whether it be crackers or salad dressing or tomato sauce or pasta, bread, anything that you buy that's packaged probably has corn or soy in it. So you think, well, I'm not going to eat corn on the cob or corn chips. I'm like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. I mean, most processed foods right now contain those are the two main ingredients. So it will have an impact on us. We won't feel it for a few more months, and then we're going to wonder, hey, how come food prices are going up? I'm like, this will be one of the reasons. So
correct. So yeah, it's all one big giant system that affects other giants. And in this time of year, as we summer is always the time that we see these dynamic storms, and it's because of the humidity that come up from the Gulf of Mexico. And so, yeah, we are far from over in terms of our storm season. Yeah. So anyway,
August is usually one of the worst months.
Yeah, and just know we're thinking about you, and hopefully this helps people understand what happened this week in the central United States. And so, yeah, but anyway, if you have any questions about this or any other weather events, shoot us an email. It's smartdumbfun@gmail.com, the brothers, sisters. And if you guys want some information, if you want, me to send you the slideshow I put together, more than happy to. And like I said, if you have any sorts of questions, let us know. That was good. Well, and I got the word yesterday that our musical experts are going to be joining us on Wednesday. And we're going to talk about something. This popped up as a conversation amongst a bunch of us last week, and it's it has to do with the 80s. It was who belongs on the Mount Rushmore of lead singers of 80s hair bands. And that's what we're going to be talking about when we come back to visit you on Wednesday. So we did smart stuff today. We are coming back with super dumb stuff on Wednesday. We will have.
So are we talking about hair or ability as a performer, or what are we talking about? What is our criteria?
we're going to talk about all of that because that was one of the questions that popped up because we had some disagreements on what's hair band versus just good rock band. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to put our brains in neutral on Wednesday. We're going to bring back musical experts, Jim and Tammy. They were our musical experts on our yacht rock segment, and they're going to be back because they're the ones that brought this question to my attention. We were all, sitting on the deck. They were sitting on the deck in St. Louis, and we were sitting on the deck here in Dresser. And I have some strong opinions about this, as do they. So there.
Okay. I might have to be the neutral person because I've tried not to think about hair bands since I was 15. So.
Well, and dust off your 80s brain. Dust off that 15-year-old brain.
Exactly.
You were still deeply in love with Styx at that point, and they don't even qualify.
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
So,
although I did listen, I had a number of male companions at that time who were really, really into hair bands. So I do have Duncan is sometimes appalled when I sing the lyrics to like autographs, My Girlfriend's Boyfriend Isn't Me, that sort of thing. So
autograph, good one.
Exactly. So surprisingly, I do have a lot of knowledge. I just try not to let anybody know because it's very St. Joseph County of me, and I'm trying to be more sophisticated, as you can tell. So,
I know. I've never been accused of being sophisticated. In fact, Mom said at once, and I've never forgotten this, and I've never let her forget that I'm not sophisticated. She's like, well, you're not very sophisticated. I'm like, well, there you go. Your mom says so.
Mom told me once that I was fairly sophisticated, but I wasn't a lady.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sounds about right, doesn't it?
Well, and I'm neither sophisticated nor a lady, so pow. Yeah, well. All right.
All right.
Anyway, you guys, thanks for watching today. Thanks for letting us brain out on you. And again, folks, Google this. Google it. There is no shortage of articles and things to read about this derecho. There's also no shortage of video to watch, and there are some stunning video that people have taken of the wins as they were doing their thing. So take a look at this. If you can, help out the folks of Iowa, Illinois, they took it in the teeth as well. So anything you can do to help is awesome, or just educate yourself on this. That's fantastic. And we will see you guys on Wednesday.
See you on Wednesday. Bye, everybody.
Bye.